Hyundai Elantra 5th generation. Good day. If you're wondering is it worth buying a 5th generation Hyundai Elantra and what problems you may encounter during operation, then you're at the right place. So in pursuit of a stylish look, Hyundai designers removed the usual moldings and plastic linings from the body. It's no wonder that without their protection, the Elantra body suffers from stones and occasionally open doors of nearby cars. If the car was not repainted before the sale, chips and small abrasions on its sidewalls will be mandatory. Suffers from small stones and sand flying from under the wheels and the hood. Trying to keep it intact, many owners paste over it with a protective film or installs plastic protection on its front edge. Protective film will not hurt to paste over the rear wheel arches. The Elantra's body structure is such that in the rain a mixture of asphalt chips, sand and water flies straight onto their outer surface. Fortunately, there are no complaints about the quality of the body steel itself. Traces of rust can be found only in those places that were poorly repaired after a serious blow. There are practically no complaints about the Hyundai Elantra interior. It won't impress with expensive finishing materials, but the hard plastic used doesn't look frankly cheap either. The initially unremarkable fabric seats also look good with age. But the headlining in the rear seat area of many used Elantras has dirty marks. The fact is that due to the sloping roof, the headroom for the rear passengers is very small. Tall passengers now and then rest their heads against the ceiling, as a result of which spots gradually appear on it. Looking for a new headliner for a used piece is hardly advisable. It's easier if you want to drive a really tidy car immediately after the purchase. Spend money on high-quality dry cleaning of the interior. The 1.6-liter gasoline engine of the Gamma, the second series, is notable for its power. Due to a number of technical solutions, engineers managed to remove 132 horsepower from a small displacement. This engine was made in China, but you shouldn't be afraid of its origin. The Koreans have established the strictest quality control, thanks to which the Chinese assembly turned out to be no worse than the Russian, Japanese or Korean assembly itself. The timing belt of the 1.6-liter engine uses a chain mechanism with a hydraulic tensioner. According to the manufacturer's assurances, the latter is designed for the entire service life of the motor, but in fact it doesn't serve more than 150,000 kilometers. Every 100,000 kilometers, a 1.6-liter unit will require valve adjustment. This is because hydraulic lifters are not provided on this motor. Structurally, the more powerful 150 horsepower 1.8-liter engine doesn't seriously differ from the 132 horsepower unit. Accordingly, their weak points are similar. And another thing is that the timing chain on a 1.8-liter engine stretches much earlier. This happens to a run of 100,000 kilometers. About 50,000 kilometers from under the hood, sounds resembling detonation may begin to be heard. Experts assure that the usual flashing of the engine ECU allows you to get rid of them. Interestingly, Hyundai itself believes that the resource of a 1.8-liter engine cannot exceed 180,000 kilometers, but the owners of Elantra have repeatedly proved that with timely, high-quality service, it can easily withstand even 250,000 kilometers. As for typical problems, they include the rapid failure of individual ignition coils. If the engine began to tweak during operation, it's probably in them. Fortunately, the coils changed quickly and easily. The owners of pre-styling Elantra with a 1.8-liter engine noted that with the onset of cold weather, the car may not start the first time. If the case is an isolated one, there is nothing to fear. If the car starts to fail more often, then you will have to change the firmware of the electronic control unit. Do not forget about the exactingness of the engines of the Korean sedan to the quality of the oil. There is very little of it in the crankcase of the engine, and the oil pump during operation creates a very high pressure in the lines for small engines. As a result, the oil loses its original characteristics faster than usual, which implies a shorter drain interval. Hyundai Elantra engines are not insured against the appearance of scoring on the cylinder walls. They are formed due to the shedding of the catalyst honeycomb, after which the abrasive dust will begin to be sucked into the cylinders. Replacing the cylinder block is very expensive. Of the minor troubles, Korean sedan owners usually experience oil seepage through the valve cover gasket and floating idle speed. Interestingly, in South Korea, Elantras are very common, running not on traditional gasoline but on gas. Some of our motorists have also experimented with blue fuel. Moreover, in most cases they turned out to be very successful, especially if gas equipment was installed on sedans with a 1.8-liter engine. The 1.6-liter engine reacted a little cooler to gas fuel. It turned out that working on gas requires adjusting the thermal clearances of the valves every 40,000 kilometers. Elantra manual and automatic transmissions have 6 steps. The similarities don't end there. Both boxes are demanding in terms of quality and oil change intervals. In mechanics, the working fluid should be renewed every 80,000 kilometers. The crane-made automatic machine requires an oil change even more often, every 50,000 kilometers. In case of contamination, you cannot do without cleaning the valve body. Owners of an Elantra with an automatic transmission should never forget that this transmission is extremely sensitive to aggressive driving. When sleeping, there is a high probability that the teeth of the differential housing will break, which entails its replacement. Of course, all other things being equal, the owners of the more powerful 150 strong version will have more problems with the automatic. Those who want to save themselves from problems altogether should pay attention to sedans with a manual transmission. The only weak point of the mechanics is considered to be a leaking oil seal of the input shaft. The Elantra's suspension is technically simple, so it can be a big problem by definition. The rear semi-independent torsion beam is very reliable, only the silent blocks wear out in it, but even they often serve more than 100,000 kilometers. Usually owners of a Korean sedan scold its suspension not because of reliability but because of too soft rear springs. When fully loaded, the rear of the car sags noticeably and the suspension has to work every now and then before the bumpers. Those owners who often have to drive a seriously loaded car are trying to change the standard springs to stiffer ones. The front suspension of the traditional McPherson scheme is also not a hassle. Its consumables last a long time and are inexpensive. Moreover, this is fully true for original spare parts and for a huge number of non-original suspension parts. Relatively quickly, on average over 40,000 kilometers, ball joints fail on our roads. But since this part doesn't differ in vitality on almost all cars, it's hardly worth considering this as a serious drawback. Finding an Elantra with a dead suspension is also difficult because this model was usually bought as a family car. Accordingly, most Elantras are used with care. Pre-styling Elantra versions were characterized by knocks on the electric power steering. This childhood disease manifested itself especially quickly in those owners who had to frequently drive on bad roads. Getting rid of knocks is easy. It's enough to replace the inexpensive plastic rail bushing. If it were not for the leakage of the hose that goes from the brake master cylinder to the anti-lock braking system, then the brake system of the Korean sedan could not have been remembered. Usually the first traces of leakage are found already with around 40,000 kilometers. Naturally, in no case should you hesitate to replace a leaking hose. There were some drawbacks, but even taking them into account, the 5th generation Hyundai Elantra sedan can be called a completely reliable car. The version with a 1.6-liter engine and a manual transmission with proper maintenance will deliver a minimum of problems. Good and 2-liter sedans with automatic, but only if before the sale they were in the hands of caring owners. If you are the owner, then be sure to leave a comment about this car. Your review will definitely help others with the choice of a car.